I know people are still filtering in, but my name is Andrew Shikiar. I'm the co-executive director and chief marketing officer at FIDO Alliance. On behalf of FIDO Alliance, I'm thrilled to welcome all of you here and everyone online to Authenticate, our first in-person Authenticate conference. Yay. We first started talking about the idea of this conference a couple years ago in 2018. So we've had this vision within the membership to externalize the good work that everyone's doing and to engage with the broader community. We had plans to be here, like physically in this building, in June of 2020, and of course COVID had other plans for us. And so we went virtual last year, and it was great to see so many of you, or so many people, attend our virtual conference and the summits we've had since then. But we're super ecstatic to have so many people here in person, and have several hundred of you watching remotely. So thanks again for your diligence, your interest, and for taking part today. We have a great couple of days planned. I'm just going to set the stage here a little bit and then turn things over to our featured keynote speakers, and we'll go on to the conference. So like I said, we're glad you could make it. I'm curious, how many of you live here in Seattle? Okay, so we chose well. So around a third of the people here on site are local. I grew up in Seattle, so for me this is kind of a homecoming. And you know, it's safe to say that Seattle's changed quite a bit, but certain things in Seattle still hold true. There's always a decent chance of rain, but the rain doesn't stop natives from being outside pretty much 24/7. You'll see people biking like Dean, biking in the rain no matter what happens. The local sports teams here in Seattle will find new ways to break your heart, inevitably, and I could attest to that. And you're never too far away from a strong cup of coffee or a local microbrew. So these are things that happen in Seattle. But more and more, you know, Seattle's seen as a hub of innovation, a beacon of innovation. And this didn't happen overnight, right? When I grew up here, this was kind of a sleepy logging town. There's Boeing, a couple other things. But in the mid-'80s, Microsoft was born, and other technology companies were born. And those are really the seedlings from where we are today. And you fast forward into the 90s, the dot-com era, Amazon was born, a lot of other e-commerce companies, infrastructure companies, and things have just gone to hyperdrive the past several years with the investments these companies have made in the local community. The city, frankly, isn't recognizable to some old farts like me, but it really is a dynamic place and a place of great innovation, and it all came from the seedlings of the past. So likewise, I think we see a similar thing in identity. I got involved in the identity landscape back in 2001. I was at Sun Microsystems and helped form the Liberty Alliance with several of the people in this room, actually. And since then, you know, really the first 2 decades of the 2000s, you know, you see a lot of terms up here. This is a sampling of terms that you've seen in the identity space. Some of these have turned into full-blown initiatives. Some have morphed into other things. Some are sitting in identity standards graveyards. But really, I'd say, you know, between 2001 and late 20-teens, it was really a period of iteration in the identity space. But recently, you know, there's been an accelerated pace of implementation, you know, due to a couple key initiatives such as digital wallets, an array of government identity services, and a general push towards passwordless, which of course is why so many of us are here this week. And you know, if you look at these initiatives and where things are heading with identity in general, you know, a common need that we all have, and all these initiatives have, is that for strong user authentication. Right? We want to have confidence in that the user is who they say they are. And that's been the case for a while, but it's becoming more and more important as these identity initiatives become more real. Of course, we've had COVID, and we've been in the pandemic over the past year and a half, and COVID really made a bad situation worse when it comes to passwords and credentials. Right? So this is the time of the presentation where we have the scary password stats. We all know that the vast majority of data breaches, over 80% of data breaches, or more, as we saw today from Microsoft, 99.9% of breaches can be avoided if you have more than a password. But weak credentials cause so many problems, and COVID made it much worse. You know, hackers all of a sudden, once the lockdown happened, had a much broader attack surface within which they could work. There were vulnerable consumers spread across the world. There were remote workers all of a sudden they could attack as well. So it's little wonder that we see stats like this with 18 million phishing attacks and malware attacks related to COVID-19 being thwarted each day by Google. A multi-fold increase in cyber attacks against financial services companies shortly after the lockdown. And so, the situation got worse, but what's a common theme across all these data points. Obviously, passwords is one of them, but the other common theme is that these attacks all take advantage of our good human nature. All right, so whether it's phishing or social engineering, the goal is to dupe someone out of their credentials. Because ultimately, I think we as human beings tend to be honest and trustworthy and trusting of people, and hackers take advantage of that. So I think the other thing we need to do as we look at bringing identity systems to scale is minimizing the human element. Right? Hackers are good at their jobs. Your employees are probably good at their jobs. Let your employees do their work rather than trying to volunteer for your InfoSec team and asking them to try to spot phishing attacks when they could ideally take the guesswork out of authentication and just do their work and do their jobs. And I think that points to the more fundamental shift that is needed in the marketplace that we've been talking about, which is to shift from credentialing that's knowledge-based to a model that's possession-based. Right? You'll hear us talking more and more about possession-based authentication. So moving from things that are in your head and what you know to things that are actually in your hands that you can prove and verify that you're in control of. So moving from passwords on servers to public keys on servers and on-device authentication. Moving from SMS OTP as a second factor to local biometric or a PIN. Moving from KBA as a means to identity proof and onboard new users to possession-based mechanisms using document authentication and other forms. And ultimately moving from passwords to pass keys and the future of modern authentication. Again, knowledge-based is susceptible to common threats, remote attacks, and possession-based is phishing resistant and is really the model we need to move to on a moving forward basis. And this really was FIDO's goal from day one. I don't know how many of you were in the newbie session, the one-on-one session this morning. I thought Microsoft had an excellent expansion of this graph. This has been FIDO's goal, is to move to a model authentication that is simpler and stronger than passwords and simpler and stronger than OTPs as a second factor. The strength comes from asymmetric public key cryptography, and the simplicity comes from the fact that this is single gesture, user-friendly, strong user authentication. And FIDO from our outset, we're coming up on our 10th year. So FIDO was formed, officially formed in 2012, opened our doors for new members in 2013. Coming up in our 10th year as operation, we've had hundreds of members take part in the alliance over those years. This is our current board of directors. It's a great set of companies. The way I like looking at this is, if you ask yourself the question, who needs to sit around the table to solve this authentication problem and this data breach problem? It's a set of companies that look a lot like this. And the board of directors is complemented by sponsor members, associate members, liaison members, government members, so many of you in this room who collectively are working on this mission. And it's really more than a set of names and companies. I think what's really fascinating when you think about it is that since FIDO's inception, there have been tens of thousands of hours of development time poured into FIDO's specifications, poured into our market enablement programs. These are some of the best and brightest minds on the planet working together to collectively solve this problem. And so there's a lot of gravitas to what we're doing in addition to a lot of industry support and momentum. And this may be one of the most important numbers that we have, right? So FIDO has gotten to work. We released 3 sets of authentication specifications. And most importantly, for any network technology, any new technology, we've gained distribution, right? So it used to be several years ago, we talked to RPs about deploying FIDO. The question was, well, who can use this? Who can I reach? And the fact of the matter is, thanks to broad support in every major web browser, in all the leading device platforms, virtually every device that's being unboxed this very moment and today can support FIDO authentication. All right, thanks, Tim. So that comes from the work that Google and Microsoft initially did by becoming FIDO certified with Android and Windows Hello. And most recently, we've seen Apple be very aggressive and positive in their support of FIDO across the Apple set of products and devices. And so it's little wonder then that we're seeing more and more adoption. All right, this is a small subset of companies that have deployed FIDO. It's meant to give you a feel for the breadth and depth and the variety of companies and use cases that could be addressed by FIDO authentication. So whether you're deploying to hundreds of millions of consumers or tens of people in your enterprise, whether you're deploying on a mobile device or a desktop or something even different than that, FIDO authentication can scale and is scaling to meet those use cases. And most notably, I think, inside FIDO Alliance, we have a broad and unified commitment from our core platform providers to not just contribute to FIDO's efforts and support FIDO Alliance as a body, but to eat their own dog food or eat our collective dog food, if you will. So a couple of highlights. So here's Google. Google has actually been deploying security keys. They have one of our first case studies. Google deployed security keys to employees in 2016 and onwards and found that not one was phished. And they found that support desk costs went down, employee satisfaction went up, and they've built from there. They've then externalized that into Google Advanced Protection. And here you see another data point of Google giving security keys to high-risk individuals to make sure that they're fully protected from government attacks. Apple, back in June, we were very pleased to see this announcement from Apple at Worldwide Developer Conference introducing the concept of passkeys. And basically, syncing passkeys across iCloud keychain means that if you are using Apple devices, you'll be able to, instead of using iCloud keychain to do a complex password on sites, you'll actually be enrolling a FIDO public key on the server. The private key is stored safely on your Apple device and synced across iCloud keychain. And then most recently, we saw Microsoft announce just a couple weeks ago that every Microsoft account holder will have the chance to get rid of their password in favor of other mechanisms for login, whether that's FIDO or Authenticator app or other things. They're taking the password out of play for hundreds of millions of consumer accounts. So all this is getting very real. It's very exciting, lots of momentum. And you'll hear from other companies this week who are also deploying FIDO. Right? So we have a great set of talks this week, both on site. Also, we have a lot of on-demand sessions I'd encourage you to check out. But as an anecdote, I'd say that one of the coolest things about helping run this conference was seeing the response we got to our call for speakers. Dozens of unsolicited submissions for people who haven't just deployed FIDO, but wish to actually share their experiences with how they deployed FIDO, what they learned, and really there's a sense of community, the sense of mission, I think, across this room, across everyone watching online, to really solve this problem and work together to implement better means of user authentication. So you have a lot to look forward to over the next couple of days. So this is all great stuff, but we're really just getting started. And to that end, I want to share some news with you all and talk about how that fits into our efforts to further drive FIDO authentication. So first of all, we're very focused more and more on driving adoption and utilization of FIDO. We have programs like Authenticate. Our working groups develop best practices and articulate that through white papers. And we think it's important also to keep ourselves honest, if you will, and understand, well, how are people actually using this? What's the consumer trend towards utilization of modern authentication? And we see studies come out now and then from companies like FIDO, other organizations, but we've introduced what we're calling the Online Authentication Barometer today. We announced this today. And the goal here is to track, what are the latest consumer habits, trends, and adoption points of modern authentication technologies across the globe. So we ran this survey in multiple geographies worldwide. This is our baseline, if you will, to understand where things stand today. And then we'll track this moving forward. Hopefully we see this kind of hockey stick rise in consumer adoption as well. Quickly on the findings that we had from our first edition, it's kind of a mixed bag, right? So people are still clinging to their passwords, probably because they're ubiquitous and that's all people know how to do. That being said, we're seeing some positive trends in people being aware that they need to do more, yet they're not quite taking the right approach. Some are using biometrics in an increasing amount, but we still see a need for more education and enablement for consumers worldwide. And we're doing things to help address that today, and we'll do more moving forward. Earlier this year, we released our first set of UX guidelines, targeted on the use case for consumers using desktop authenticators for online banking. Right, so we actually, this was led by leading banks and brands like Visa, JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Intuit, and many other companies collaborated in this initiative to help scope a set of tests and ultimately write guidelines for the best way that you can prime users, educate users, engage users to get them to enroll and leverage FIDO instead of using passwords for online banking. So we'll do more of that moving forward. Another thing we realize, which both the UX study points to and the barometer points to, is a need for more consumer education and consumer-ready assets. So we have a website, loginwithfido.com. It has a lot of consumer-ready information, both for consumers to access directly and also for service providers to point their consumers to should they have more questions about how FIDO works. So those are both things you'll see us doing more and more of moving forward. Additionally, we understand there's a need to empower industry professionals, so the builders, if you will. Right? So we're doing some work with developers, but this is more focused on actually the professionals inside an enterprise who will be responsible for implementing FIDO authentication. So some of you may have come to the pre-conference workshop that was jointly held with ID Pro, talking about the certification programs for this newly announced FIDO Certified Professional Program, as well as the ID Pro Certified Identity Pro program. But what we're aiming to do is to help train professionals who wish to really improve and showcase their FIDO deployment skills. We think this will help address the implementation skill gap, and also give these professionals a chance to showcase their skills, which will help them be more marketable for future jobs and employment moving forward. We announced today. We'll have more information tomorrow. Ray Rivera has a session tomorrow at 11 a.m. talking about the FIDO Certified Professional Program. I'd encourage you to check that out. Beyond that, I think as you look at where FIDO has come and where we're going, we've done great work, as we pointed to, in getting FIDO authentication adopted, the capabilities in the hands of users, but there are adjacent gaps that we need to address to really fulfill our mission of trying to stop the data breach plague and the weak credentialing problems that we face. And there's two gaps in particular that we've been talking about and that we're making good progress on. The first one is in the area of identity verification and binding. I would say this is possibly the most important work that FIDO is doing, as it helps address the growing need for remote identity verification, and perhaps more importantly, closes the social engineering backdoor that so many hackers leverage when it comes to things like account recovery and even with synthetic identity fraud at the stage of account proofing. And so our effort there is basically we want to create a possession-based method for proofing that matches our commitment to possession-based authentication. We're assessing performance of DocAuth solutions. We're going to bind the verified identities to FIDO credentials, and ultimately, again, this will enable simpler, stronger account recovery to help answer the type of question we got at the end of the FIDO 101 session this morning. If you want to learn more, we have a session on Tuesday at 4 p.m. That will go into our work here in more detail. The other space we're focused on is IoT, where, frankly, the explosion of devices are happening in numbers that you just can't get your head around. And unfortunately, that explosion is happening and outpacing the required security mechanisms that are needed to be put in place to secure the IoT. So we've announced and released the FIDO device onboard spec. This is our new standard for efficient and cost-effective and password-free onboarding of IoT devices. This spec is actually published in the 1.0 version, and there's source code available. I'd encourage you to check that out. If you want to learn more, please attend this session tomorrow at 1:45 on FIDO device onboard. So look, that's where we stand today. Thanks for getting this update on FIDO and getting a peek at what we have ahead. This slide says FIDO is the future of user authentication. I'd probably change that to say FIDO is the present and future of authentication, period. We need your inputs. We value this community. We value our members, and all of you who are non-members also, being here today and the next couple of days. We want your feedback. We want your interaction. And we want your ongoing support as we all work to move beyond passwords. So before I turn things over to Bob, I want to give a couple shout outs and some housekeeping items. First of all, some thank yous. So special thanks to our program committee, Abby, Christian, Pam, Jeremy, Andy Hindle, and Bill Wright, some of whom are here, some who are remote. This is a really distinguished list of individuals who gave us so much time in helping review all the submissions, to shape the program, shape the strategy for this conference, and they have been since we first started this in 2020. So thank you to all of them for your ongoing support. Thanks to our sponsors. You see all of them downstairs, most of them downstairs. We also have online sponsors who are supporting the streaming aspects here. Again, we appreciate their support. I'd encourage you all to meet with them in the expo area downstairs or online for those of you streaming. All have interesting solutions for modern authentication. Please take a couple of minutes to meet with them as well. And then thanks to our speakers. It's not easy to take the time to submit an abstract and then to get it accepted and work with us to iterate on it, to get it in shape to be presented to all of you. So thanks to our speakers for taking the time to do this. Also, we have two MCs. So from the FIDO team, Megan Shamus, who you see over there, she's going to be emceeing kind of the adoption-centric track, and David Turner will be emceeing the more technical track. So thanks to both of them for helping facilitate this as well over the next couple of days. And a couple housekeeping items. So how to keep connected here. We have 2 online tools you can use. Everyone at home is already using Attendee Hub. It's a great platform. It allows you to see all the streams in real time. You can ask questions, interact with other people. And if you want to access it, you can just scan that QR code or find your registration and go from there as well. Additionally, there's a mobile app. You can use that. Go to your app store, search Cvent, select Authenticate, and then you can use that for Q&A and also session feedback. So we do want your feedback. Last but not least, finishing with the fun stuff. Wednesday night, it says outside it's our networking reception. I changed the slide to say closing party because it's meant to be a party, not just a networking reception. If you've not been to the Mopop Museum, you got to check this out. It's a really cool spot. All sorts of music and pop culture information. There's a whole wall of guitars from people from Jimi Hendrix to Don Henley to you name it. It's this really cool spot. We also have private access to the Pearl Jam exhibit. So if you're on the fence, get off the fence. We'll see you Wednesday night. To get there, there's a monorail, like it's 2 blocks down. We have passes for you guys to get there using the monorail tickets. Stop by the registration desk tomorrow or Wednesday to pick those up if you want the monorail transportation. So with that, I'll wrap up here. Thank you so much. I'm now very happy to introduce Bob Lord. We're thrilled to have Bob here today. Thanks for coming, Bob. Bob was most recently the Chief Security Officer at the Democratic National Committee. And before that, he served as a CISO and other InfoSec roles at companies such as Yahoo, Cisco, Twitter, and many others. So Bob, I'm happy to turn things over to you. Thank you.